I never thought I'd live to see the day my own child would turn me out of my own home. My son, my only child, looked me in the eyes and said, "You should go. This house isn't yours anymore." Even now, as I sit here telling you this, I can still hear those words, still feel the sting, still feel the betrayal blooming in my chest, like a wound that won't close. But I suppose my story didn't start there. That moment. It was just a storm, after years of quiet weather. So let me take you back, before the shouting, before the tears, before the papers were signed and the locks were changed. My name is Farida. I'm 64 years old. And I raised my son, Rehan, completely on my own. My husband, Adil, passed away in a car accident when I was just 32. I still remember the way the police officer looked at me when he told me the news. Like he knew it would destroy me. But I didn't have the luxury of breaking down. I had a 4-month-old baby sleeping in the next room, and he needed me more than I needed to cry. So I stood up. I wiped my tears, and I began what would become the hardest journey of my life, being both mother and father to a child I loved more than life itself. We didn't have much. I worked long hours at a local school as a receptionist during the day, and in the evenings I cleaned houses. My hands were always tired, my back ached constantly. But my heart? It stayed strong, because Rehan gave me purpose. His smile made every struggle feel worth it. He was such a sweet child, always clinging to my dupatta, following me around the house, asking me questions about everything. I remember once, when he was 6, he told me, "Ami, when I grow up, I'll buy you a big house with a garden and a fountain, and you'll never have to work again." I laughed and told him I'd be happy with just a cup of chai and his company. That was the kind of relationship we had. Pure, close, full of dreams. And so, I saved. Bit by bit. Every spare rupee I had went into a small envelope I kept tucked away under my mattress. It took me 11 years, but eventually I had enough for a down payment on a modest little house. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom, single-story home in a quiet neighborhood. But to me, it was a palace. My palace. Bought with sweat and sacrifice. It was the first time in my life I owned anything of real value. I made it a home for Rehan. Painted his room blue, put little glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling, bought a second-hand study table, and told him this was where he'd plan his dreams. He grew up in that house. He took his first steps in the kitchen. Got his first fever in that living room. Celebrated his birthdays in the backyard with the neighborhood kids. That house was filled with laughter, noise, prayers, burnt rotis, and love. And I never asked for anything in return. Not once. Everything I did because that's what mothers do. We give, and we keep giving, even when there's nothing left to give. As Rehan grew older, he changed. Slowly at first. I didn't notice it much when he went off to college. He was busy after all, and I was proud of him. He was the first in our family to go to university. But the phone calls became fewer, the visits shorter. And when he came back home after graduating, it wasn't with the excitement of a son returning to his mother's arms. It was with the restless energy of someone eager to move on. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up, they build their own lives. But somewhere deep down, I missed the little boy who once held my hand when he was scared of the dark. Then he met Alina. She was beautiful, confident, and polite, but distant. From the first day she visited our home, I could tell she wasn't comfortable with me. I tried. I really did. I complimented her clothes, cooked her favorite meals, even stayed out of their way to give them space. But she never quite warmed up to me. After they got married, everything shifted. My house suddenly felt like someone else's. My routines were disrupted, my habits questioned. One day I used the washing machine without asking, and Alina told me with a forced smile, "It's better if we keep things separate." Still, I endured. Because this was my son's home, our home. And I didn't want to be the kind of mother who made things difficult. Then, about a year after their wedding, Rehan came to me with a proposal. "Ami," he said, "I think it would be better for all of us if the house was in my name. You know, legally, just to make things easier. Insurance, taxes, inheritance, all that." I looked at him stunned. "Beta, this is our home. Why would we need to change anything? It's just a formality, Ami," he insisted. "You'll still live here, obviously. Nothing will change. Trust me." And that word, trust, that's what got me. I did trust him, with everything I had. So I agreed. I went to the lawyer. I signed the papers. But I never told him that I had quietly kept the original deed safe in a locker under my name. Not because I didn't trust him, but because a voice deep inside me, a whisper I couldn't ignore, told me to hold on. Just in case. I pushed that voice aside. I convinced myself I was overthinking, that Rehan would never betray me, that my own son, whom I raised with my blood and tears, would never throw me away like an old piece of furniture. But I was wrong. Oh, how wrong I was. Because just months after the papers were signed, the house didn't feel like mine at all. Alina started talking about renovations and how she wanted to convert the guest room, which was my bedroom, into a nursery. Rehan stopped knocking before entering my room. Started treating me like a tenant, not a mother. And eventually, the day came when he stood at the kitchen counter, arms crossed, and said the words that still echo in my head. "You've had a good run here, Ami, but it's time for you to start thinking about moving out. You'll be more comfortable somewhere quieter." I couldn't breathe. I thought I'd misheard him. "Move out," I whispered. "Where will I go, Rehan?" He shrugged. "You can stay with Carla for a while, or we can help you find a small place." That's when I realized he wasn't just suggesting, he was telling me to leave. The house I built with my own hands. The home I filled with memories and warmth. The place I raised him in, brick by brick, prayer by prayer. He wanted me out of it. I left that day, quietly, with nothing but a small suitcase and a broken heart. But what Rehan didn't know, what he still doesn't know, is that while he may have taken my signature, he never took my soul, and he never took the deed that still bears my name. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about a mother, a fighter, a woman who gave everything and still stood tall when the world turned its back on her. And now, I want to tell you everything, because no mother deserves to be forgotten, and no woman should ever forget her worth. After I left that house, the house I once called home, I found myself sitting on a small cot in my sister's spare room, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun above me. My mind wasn't quiet. It couldn't be. How could it rest when it was so full of memories? Memories of Rehan when he was small, of a simpler time, before the bitterness, before the distance, before the heartbreak. I suppose those years were the best of my life, even though they were the hardest too. People always imagine that hardship and happiness can't live together, but they can. I've lived through both, side by side. I still remember the first night I brought Rehan home from the hospital. He was wrapped in a thin cotton blanket, barely bigger than a loaf of bread, with a tuft of black hair and the tiniest fists I'd ever seen. My heart felt too full for my chest. I couldn't stop staring at him, his breath, his little hiccups, the way he curled into me like he already knew who I was. I whispered to him that night, "Don't worry, Beta. I'll take care of everything. Just grow. Just live." And I kept that promise. There were nights I didn't sleep, days I didn't eat properly, weeks when I was too exhausted to even cry. But I kept going. I had to. There was no husband, no fallback, no wealth passed down from family. Just me, my son, and the weight of the world. I took a receptionist job at a school, working from 8 to 3. I remember wearing my only good shalwar kameez every other day, hoping no one noticed. I'd smile at parents walking in, hand out report cards, organize files, all while worrying whether Rayhan's babysitter remembered to warm his milk on time. In the evenings, I cleaned homes. I'd come home, tie my dupatta tight around my head, and head back out to scrub floors, wash dishes, do laundry for families who barely acknowledged my presence. But I didn't complain. I counted every rupee I earned like it was gold, because every coin brought me one step closer to building a better life for my boy. And Rayhan, he made it all worth it. He was such a bright, curious child, always asking questions. "Ami, why is the sky blue? Ami, what's inside the moon? Ami, when I grow up, can I buy you a big car with a fan inside?" He made me laugh on days when my legs felt like jelly from standing too long. He would wrap his arms around me when I walked in the door, even if I smelled of sweat and floor cleaner. He was my light, my entire world, my motivation. We didn't have fancy things, but I tried to give him a good life. On Eid, I'd save up for weeks to buy him a new kurta and sandals. On his birthdays, I'd make fruit chaat and buy one packet of balloons to hang in the living room. I'd bake a simple cake in the old oven, and we'd sing, just the two of us, with joy that didn't need an audience. I even helped plan the wedding, what little I could manage. I stitched cushion covers, rolled sweets in my hands, and sat in the corner with tears in my eyes as my only child started a new chapter. That's what mothers do, right? I remember one rainy evening. We had no electricity, and the roof leaked slightly over the corner of the kitchen. We lit candles and sat close, sharing a bowl of dal and leftover roti. Rayhan looked up at me and said, "Ami, I love when it's just us. I don't want anyone else." I smiled and said, "Me too, Beta. Always just us." I believed we were enough. When he started school, I bought second-hand uniforms and stitched them carefully. I couldn't afford a fancy bag, so I made one from a leftover piece of denim and stitched his initials on it. He showed it off like it was from a branded store. "My Ami made it," he told his friends. I was so proud of him, so full of hope. Every evening, he'd come home and tell me everything. "I got a star sticker in math. I was goalie today and stopped 3 goals. His stories filled our tiny home with life. But as he grew older, life grew more expensive. School fees, stationery, tuitions, everything piled up. I started sewing clothes for neighbors at night to earn extra. My fingers were raw from threading needles in dim light, but my heart never wavered. I kept dreaming for him. All I wanted was to give him the life I never had. A life where he wouldn't have to count every coin. A life where he wouldn't have to see his mother crying silently into her dupatta because there wasn't enough money for both of them to eat well. Then, when Rayhan was around 12, something happened that changed everything. I received a small inheritance from my late uncle. Not much, but enough to make a dream feel reachable. I added that money to my years of careful savings, and finally, I bought a house. A small, worn-down home in a working-class neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a cracked front step and walls that needed paint. But it was mine. Ours. Paid for honestly, through sleepless nights and aching hands. The day we moved in, I brought Rayhan to the empty living room and sat him down. I said, "Beta, this is your home. No one can take it from you. You will always have a place in this world. I built this so you'll never have to feel like you don't belong." He hugged me tight and whispered, "You're the best Ami in the world. I'll never leave you." That sentence, I wish I hadn't held on to it for so long. I decorated that home with love, painted his room blue like he wanted, put up fairy lights in the kitchen because he said they made the room feel magical, bought a small plant for the corner window, and every morning we'd check if it had grown. We were happy, truly deeply happy. Even though the world outside didn't always give us kindness, inside that little home, we had peace. We had laughter. We had each other. Years passed. He grew into a handsome young man, taller than me, wiser in some ways, still a child in others. When he got his university acceptance letter, he cried. I held his face in my hands and told him, "You earned this. Never forget where you came from, Beta." He promised he wouldn't. I wish I could go back and freeze time at that moment. Before the love grew distant, before the hugs stopped, before the decisions that broke us. Back then, I truly believed I was raising a kind, loyal man. The kind who would protect his mother the way I protected him. And maybe part of him still remembers that. Or maybe he's buried it so deep beneath pride and pressure that he doesn't feel it anymore. But I remember. I remember everything. And that's why, even though I walked out of that house with nothing but my dignity, I still have the memories that built it, the moments that made it sacred. He might hold the keys today, but I hold the story. And that, my dear listeners, is something no one can take away. People think heartbreak comes all at once, like a sudden crash. But sometimes it creeps in slowly, quietly, so slowly that you don't even notice you're breaking. That's how it happened for me. After Rayhan graduated, life felt full of a possibility again. He got a decent job at a firm downtown, bought his first second-hand car, and every evening he'd come home and tell me about deadlines, meetings, and office politics. I didn't understand most of it, but I loved listening. Just hearing his voice, watching his eyes light up, it filled my heart. I cooked his favorite meals, pressed his clothes for work, made sure he had warm rotis with his dal. Even when I was tired, even when my knees ached from age, I did it all with joy. Because he was still my boy, just older now, taller, wearing formal shoes, and a serious face, but still mine. Then he told me he had met someone. Her name was Sana. Pretty name. A gentle girl from his office, he said. Educated, smart, polite. I smiled, nodded, asked the usual questions. How long had he known her? Was she kind? Did he love her? He answered with a boyish grin I hadn't seen in years. Yes, Ami, she makes me feel calm. I gave him my blessing. Why wouldn't I? I wanted him to have everything: love, stability, a partner, a life. When Sana moved into our home, I welcomed her with an open heart. But from the beginning, I felt something. Something small, like a wall being quietly built, brick by careful brick. She was polite, always polite, but never warm. She spoke to me with respect, but never with affection. When we were alone, silence filled the air between us. Not the comfortable kind, but the kind that makes you feel invisible. I brushed it off. She's adjusting, I told myself. It takes time. I tried to bond with her. I'd make tea in the afternoon and ask her to sit with me. Sometimes she would. Sometimes she'd say she had work, or errands, or just go to her room and close the door. I understood, or at least I tried to. Rayhan seemed happy. That mattered more than anything else to me. But as the weeks passed, things started to change. Subtly, quietly. The house that was once filled with Rayhan's voice became quieter. He came home later, spoke less. We still ate together, at first. But slowly meals became something they had in their room, while I ate alone in the kitchen. I started noticing changes in small ways. Decisions were made without me. Groceries bought that I hadn't asked for. Items moved from shelves. My old photos taken down, replaced with the new frames. Just the two of them, smiling like they were the only people in the world. It felt like watching a play from backstage. You're part of it, but not really. You see the lights, hear the applause, but no one looks at you. I remember one day in particular. I had cooked biryani, Rayhan's favorite. I spent hours on it. The aroma filled the house, and for a moment, I imagined things might feel like they used to. He came in, smelled it, smiled, and said, "Ami, this smells amazing." My heart fluttered. "Sit, better, it's ready." But then Sana walked in. She glanced at the table and said, "Oh, we actually already ordered food." Rayhan had a craving for Chinese. Just like that. He looked at me, gave a half apology, and followed her into their room. I sat at the table alone that night, looking at the untouched biryani. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was in my own home. I told myself, this is what mothers do. We understand. We step back. We make space. That's how it's always been, right? But understanding doesn't stop the ache. I missed him. My son. The one who once held my face in his hands and told me I was his whole world. The one who cried when he couldn't find me in a supermarket. The one who used to ask me to read the same bedtime story 3 times in a row. Now he had a new world, and I wasn't in it. I kept telling myself it would get better. That one day he'd come sit with me like before. That we'd laugh about his childhood stories. That Sana would warm up and we'd be like a family again. But things didn't get better. They got colder. I stopped being Ami and became she. As in, she already ate. Or she's in the other room. I became the background, the helping hand, the one who did the laundry, made the chai, stayed out of the way. There were moments I wanted to speak up, to ask, did I do something wrong? But the words never came. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. One evening, I overheard them talking. Sana said, "I think it's time we had our own space." Rayhan hesitated, then replied, "I know." But how? This house? The sentence trailed off. I stood behind the kitchen door, hand trembling around the tray I had just prepared. My ears ringing louder than the clinking glasses. I had spent my whole life building that house, that home. And now, they were thinking of pushing me out of it. But still I stayed silent. I prayed. I hoped. I remembered the promise I once made, to take care of him no matter what. And I held on to that, until the day came when hope wasn't enough anymore. Some betrayals don't come with a bang. They come with a cup of tea and a soft voice. A gentle conversation that slowly turns your world upside down. I remember the day like it happened this morning. It was a quiet Sunday. the kind where the sun filters through the curtains just right, and the kettle whistles softly on the stove. I was sitting at the dining table peeling peas, my thoughts far away, lost in the dull ache behind my knees. Rayhan walked in, looking a little nervous. He poured me a cup of tea, added just the right amount of sugar, like I liked it, and sat across from me. "Ami," he began, "there's something I need to talk to you about." Now, any mother will tell you, when your child uses that tone, you feel it in your chest first. That slight shift in the air, that instinct that tells you something is coming. I looked up. "What is it, Beta?" He rubbed his palms together, took a breath and said, "I was talking to a financial advisor at work. You know, just planning for the future. And he mentioned something important." I just nodded, waiting. He leaned in. He said, "It's risky having the house still under your name, especially at your age. God forbid something happens. There'll be too much paperwork, legal confusion, inheritance delays. It's better if everything is already settled." I blinked. "What are you saying?" "I mean," he smiled, "why not just transfer the house to me now? It'll make everything smoother in the future. Legally, it'll be mine, yes. But nothing will change, Ami. You'll still live here, of course. This is your home." I stared at him for a moment. 100 things raced through my mind. Memories of building that house with your father, penny by penny. Every tile, every window, chosen with care. I remembered painting the walls while you slept in your crib. I remembered planting the jasmine bush outside your window. And now you are asking me to sign it all away. I placed my tea down and said quietly, "But why now, Rayhan?" He gave me that familiar, boyish smile. "Just a formality. A safety net. It's just paperwork. You trust me, don't you?" And that was the question, wasn't it? Do you trust me? Of course I did. With my whole heart. I trusted him when he was a baby clinging to my neck. I trusted him through every scraped knee, every exam, every heartbreak. Even when the house grew quiet and cold, even when the distance between us widened, I still trusted him. But something deep inside me whispered, "Be careful." Still, I nodded slowly. "Okay, Beta, if you think it's best." He beamed. "Thank you, Ami. You're the best." A few days later, we went to the lawyer's office. A dull, little place with dusty curtains and creaking furniture. The lawyer handed me a stack of papers. It all looked like gibberish, pages and pages of legal words I couldn't make sense of. I hesitated. My pen hovered over the line. Rayhan placed a hand on mine. "Ami, it's fine. Everything's okay. You don't have to worry. That's the thing about mothers. We don't sign papers. We sign over our trust." I signed. But before I handed over everything, I asked for one thing in return. "Let me keep the original deed," I said. "Just for old time's sake." Rayhan laughed. "You and your memories." But he agreed. The lawyer handed it over in an old brown envelope. I tucked it into my purse quietly. Something about it made me feel safe. Like keeping a spare key under the flower pot, even when you've given everyone else a copy. On the ride home, I looked out the window in silence. The trees on our street swayed gently in the wind. I remembered walking that road, carrying Rayhan in my arms when he had the flu. I remembered how he once said, "When I grow up, I'll buy you a palace, Ami." And now I had given him the only palace I ever built. After that day, life continued as usual. Or so I thought. But the air felt different, like something had shifted, even if I couldn't see it yet. Sana stopped pretending to be warm. She barely acknowledged me now. Rehan became more absent. Always pissy, always distracted. The silence in the house wasn't quiet anymore. It was heavy. I started to feel like a guest in my own home. One morning, I found a cupboard in the hallway, locked. A cupboard that had never been locked before. My things inside had been moved. Some of my utensils were gone from the kitchen. Little things, unspoken things. Then came the whispers. Late at night, behind closed doors. Faint arguments. She's still here. We need space. But she's my mother. Followed by silence. I tried to hold on. I cooked meals even though no one ate them. I folded their laundry with care. I even bought Sana a shawl for winter, hoping something might shift. But the cold between us wasn't the kind a shawl could fix. And then came the day I feared, but never imagined would actually arrive. When you raise a child, you think the hardest part will be the fevers, the tantrums, the sleepless nights. But those are nothing compared to watching the same child look at you like a stranger. After I gave Rehan the house, things didn't change overnight. No, the change came slowly, like winter creeping in under a door. At first, it's just a breeze. You ignore it. Then one day, you're sitting in your own home wearing a sweater, wondering why it feels so cold. It started with Sana's voice. Her tone began to shift. No longer sweet, no longer polite. Her words came clipped, like she was talking to a tenant, not family. One evening, I asked her, "Sana, do you need help in the kitchen?" She didn't even look at me, just said, "No, Ami." "I've got it." There was no warmth in her voice, not even indifference, something colder than that. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Like she was annoyed I even spoke. I told myself she must be tired. Maybe she had a rough day. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, but the little slights kept coming. The teacups I washed were re-washed, as if I hadn't done them well enough. The TV remote was always hidden away. The bathroom I used had cleaning products left out on purpose, like a silent message. You make things dirty. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Sana rearranging things. My spice jars, the ones I had used for 20 years, were dumped into a box. "Sana, what are you doing?" She didn't look up. "Making space." "For what?" She paused. "My own things." I wanted to say, "This is my kitchen, my house," but I stayed quiet. I don't know why. Maybe I was still holding on to the hope that it would get better. Then one day, I overheard them. It was late at night. I had come out to get water and I heard their voices from the bedroom. The door wasn't fully closed. "She's still here," Sana whispered. Rehan sighed. "What do you want me to do? She's my mother." "Rehan, we need space. We're having a baby. That room would be perfect for the nursery." My heart stopped. My room? The room with my books? My prayer mat? The photo of your father on the side table? Rehan didn't argue. He just said, "I'll talk to her." I went back to my room without the water. My throat burned with tears I couldn't cry. From that night on, I saw everything differently. The smiles were forced. The conversations became shorter. Rehan avoided eye contact. Sana stopped greeting me at all. I began to feel invisible. I would sit in the lounge and they'd talk over me. They stopped including me in family dinners. They went out without telling me. Days passed in silence. I began to shrink into myself. I stopped cooking, stopped sitting in the living room. I stayed in my room, folding and refolding old clothes, rereading old prayer books, talking to Allah more than anyone else. And still, I hoped Rehan would come to me one evening, sit by my side like he used to and say, Ami, I'm sorry. Things have been tense. Let's talk. But that day never came. Instead, a colder one arrived. It was a Thursday. I remember because the air smelled of rain and the house was unusually quiet. Rehan came into my room. He didn't sit down. He stood near the door, hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor. Ami, he said, we need to talk. I looked up. Something inside me already knew. We've been thinking, he continued. Maybe it's time you found your own place. My ears rang. I blinked at him, unsure if I heard correctly. He rushed to explain. It's not that we don't love you. Of course we do. It's just things are changing. Sana's pregnant. We're growing our family. We need space. And you deserve your own privacy too, right? I sat frozen. For a long time, I didn't say a word. Finally, I whispered, This is my home. He hesitated. Technically, it's in my name now. That sentence, those words, cut deeper than anything ever had. I raised you in this house. I gave up my youth, my dreams, everything I had, to give you a roof over your head. And now you stand here telling me I should leave. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply nodded. Okay. Rehan looked startled. You're not upset? I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man in front of me was not the boy I had raised. That boy would run to me with scraped knees and say, Ami, I'll protect you forever. That boy was gone. I said, No, beta. I'm not upset. Just tired. He left, awkwardly, saying something about helping me pack. I sat there alone in the room, surrounded by the life I had built, the memories I had protected, the love I had poured. And now I was being told to pack it all into boxes and go. But even in that moment, I wasn't broken. I was wounded, yes, but not broken, because I had something Rehan didn't know. I had the deed, the original, signed and sealed, still under my name, kept safely where no one had looked. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir inside me, a kind of quiet strength. I wouldn't tell him. Not yet. I would wait. I wanted to see just how far he'd go. How far the sun I once called my moon would push the mother who gave him the stars. The day I was asked to leave came sooner than I ever expected. I had hoped for so long that things would change, that Rehan would realize what he was doing, that Sana would soften, that the house, the memories, everything we shared, would bring us back together somehow. But hope, it seems, is a fragile thing. It's delicate. And when you hold it for too long, it crumbles. That's what happened that Thursday afternoon. Rehan's words still echoed in my mind. We need space, Ami. The weight of those words was heavier than anything I had ever carried. He didn't even try to sugarcoat it. He didn't try to explain. He didn't even hug me or look me in the eyes as he spoke. It was as if he was giving me a notice, a formality, like someone telling you your lease is up. I had tried to be strong. I had tried to stay calm, but deep inside something broke. Not the way you think. Not in a way that could be fixed by tears or begging. No, this was deeper. Something in me snapped, but not with bitterness or hate. It was a quiet, almost sad acceptance. I could feel the silence of the house that night. The same house that had once been filled with laughter, with the clink of cutlery, with voices shouting over each other in excitement. Now it was just empty. I walked back to my room, my hands trembling as I started to pack. It wasn't much, just a few clothes, some of my old books, the photographs scattered on the nightstand, and the trinkets I had collected over the years. I had lived in that room for so long that I didn't need much. The memories were what kept me going. But now those memories were slipping away, like sand through my fingers. Sana came by at one point, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, her arms folded, her eyes avoiding mine. I didn't look at her either. I didn't have the strength to face her. There was a time when I would have asked her what was wrong, why she was acting this way, why she couldn't see what I had done for this family. But now, all I could do was silently pack the last remnants of my life into a suitcase. Rehan didn't come to help. He didn't even offer a word of comfort. He was too busy with his own life, his own plans, his own future. He had already moved on. As I zipped up the suitcase, I took one last look at the room, the bed I had shared with your father, the lamp that once lit up stories of our younger days, the curtains I had sewn with my own hands when I was too tired to sleep. There was so much history in this room, so much love, so much sacrifice. And yet, here I was, packing it all up like it was nothing. I walked out of the room, through the hallway. The house felt so different now. It wasn't mine anymore. Not really. It was just a shell of what it used to be. I glanced at the pictures hanging on the wall, pictures of birthdays, anniversaries, school plays. The smile on Rehan's face in those photos looked so real, so genuine. But now, I wondered if he even remembered those moments. If he even remembered the sacrifices we made to get here. I reached the door, the same door I had stood behind when your father left for work every day. The same door I'd kissed Rehan goodbye as he headed off to school. The same door where we celebrated his achievements, big and small. I stopped for a moment, my hand on the doorknob. My heart ached. This was my home. This was my life. And now I was walking away from it, as if I were nothing more than a guest. But I wasn't just walking out the door to leave. I was walking out because I had no other choice. Because in this moment, my son had made it clear that I wasn't wanted. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air hit my face. The sky was painted in soft hues of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. I paused on the porch, taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. The bags felt heavier than they should. I looked down at them, feeling the weight of everything I was leaving behind. Every corner of that house, every inch of the land that had once been so full of life, now felt hollow. I didn't say anything. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I didn't even look back at Rehan or Sana, who had watched me from the doorway. I had given them everything I had. And now I was walking away with only the things I could carry. But as I stepped off the porch and onto the driveway, something inside me stirred. A quiet strength. A feeling that perhaps this wasn't the end. I had spent my life taking care of others, sacrificing my own dreams, my own desires, for the sake of my family. I had given them the best of me. But now it was time to give something back to myself. It was time to stand up, even if I had to do it alone. I wasn't defeated. I wasn't broken. I walked away from the house, but I didn't walk away defeated. The weight of the deed in my pocket reminded me that I had not lost everything. Not yet. The house may have been taken from me, but not my dignity, not my worth. I wasn't going to let Rehan's betrayal be the last chapter of my story. No, this was just the beginning of something new. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was going to fight for my own happiness. As I turned the corner, heading down the street, I looked up at the stars. The same stars that had watched over our family. The same stars that still shone, no matter how dark the night got. I had no idea where I was going, but I was moving forward. And that, I realized, was all that mattered. I spent the next few days trying to gather myself. The suitcase I carried with me seemed far too small for everything I had lost. It held only the most practical things: clothes, some toiletries, but nothing that could fill the emptiness that now lingered in my chest. I had nowhere to go, no home, no place to call my own. In the past, when life had been tough, I'd always had my friend Nadia. She was the one who had helped me pick up the pieces when your father passed away. The one who had sat with me in silence when I needed a shoulder to lean on. I hadn't spoken to her much in the years since, as I focused on my family, on Rehan. But now I needed someone to hear me, someone who understood. When I called her, her voice cracked with concern when I told her what had happened. I could hear the shock in her words, her disbelief that Rehan could do such a thing. "Come stay with me," she said. "You're not alone in this." I didn't want to burden her. She had her own life, her own struggles. But there was something in her voice, a sense of urgency that pulled at me. I packed up my few belongings and made my way to her house. The place that had once been filled with laughter, tea, and the warm comfort of true friendship. Nadia's house was small, cozy, the kind of place where everyone feels at home. It had been years since I had been here, but stepping inside felt like stepping into a memory I hadn't realized I was missing. The scent of her cooking, the quiet hum of a fan in the background, the pictures on the walls. It all made me feel like I was part of something familiar again. But despite the warmth of her home, the coldness in my heart remained. Nadia took one look at my face and knew exactly what had happened. "Rehan kicked you out, didn't he?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. I nodded, unable to find the words. There was a lump in my throat, and no matter how many times I tried to speak, it wouldn't go away. Nadia shook her head, her face a mixture of anger and sympathy. "I can't believe he did this to you. You gave him everything. Everything, Ami. And this is how he repays you?" I wiped my eyes, feeling the weight of it all. "I don't know what happened, Nadia. I thought we were family. I thought we'd always be family." My voice faltered as the words left my lips. "You are family," she said firmly. "And he's treating you like this? This is betrayal, plain and simple." I didn't want to admit it, but deep down I knew she was right. The pain of being thrown out of my own home, my own son turning his back on me, was beyond anything I had ever imagined. Nadia made tea, and we sat together in her small living room, the silence between us thick. She listened to my story, not interrupting, just letting me talk. When I finished, she took a deep breath and leaned forward, her hands clasped in her lap. "You need to take action, Ami. You can't just let him get away with this," she said. "You have the deed, right? The house is still yours." I looked away, unsure. The deed was in my bag, locked away in a drawer. It was the one thing I had left, the one thing that tied me to that house. But I wasn't ready to confront Rehan. Not yet. He's still my son, Nadia. I can't do that to him. I can't take him to court, sue him for the house. My voice trembled with the pain of it all. He's my son. No matter what he did, he's still my child. Nadia's eyes softened, but there was a firmness in her words. "Ami, you have to think about yourself now. You've done enough for him. It's time for you to stand up for what's right. Don't let him take everything you've worked for." I could hear the desperation in her voice, the urgency of it. She was right, of course. But it felt so wrong, so foreign, to even think about legal action against my own son. I turned away, staring out the window, lost in thought. I didn't want to let go of the love I had for him. I didn't want to accept that Rayhan had become someone who would do this to me. My heart ached, torn between the love I still held for my child and the reality of the situation. I know you're not ready, Nadia said, as if reading my mind. But you need to be, for your own peace of mind, for your own dignity. I couldn't respond. The words stuck in my throat. How do you fight for what's yours when it feels like you're fighting against your own flesh and blood? Later that night, I lay in bed, tossing and turning. The house was quiet, too quiet. In the stillness, the thought of Rayhan and Sana, the house in their hands now, haunted me. I kept hearing their voices in my head, the words they'd said, their indifference, their coldness. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, like I was slowly fading away. The next morning, Nadia made breakfast. Her kindness a balm to my broken heart. We sat down to eat, but the weight of everything pressed down on me again. Suddenly, I received a call. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I answered, the voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Rayhan's. Ami, he said, his tone flat. I need to talk to you. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. What now? I held the phone tightly in my hand. What is it, Rayhan? I just wanted to let you know, he said, pausing for a moment, that we've put the house up for sale. It's on the market now. My stomach dropped. I felt my heart race, the blood draining from my face. I could hear the words, but they didn't make sense. The house, the one I had built for us, the house I had worked for, gone. I don't want you coming back, he continued. Sana and I, we have our plans. It's time for you to move on. The phone felt like a weight in my hand. I couldn't hold it anymore. I dropped it on the table, my chest tightening. Rayhan had crossed the final line. I looked at Nadia, who was watching me with wide eyes. She didn't need to ask what happened. She knew. They're selling it, I whispered, feeling numb. The house, it's gone. Nadia stood up and walked over to me, taking my hand. You don't need to do this, Ami. You don't have to fight this alone. We'll fight for it together. But in my heart, I knew. Rayhan was no longer the son I had raised. He was someone else now. And this was the final betrayal. The days after the phone call from Rayhan were a blur of disbelief, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. I had never imagined this would happen. Not like this. My own son selling the house, my home, without a second thought. The house I'd worked so hard for, the house that had been the symbol of everything I had built for us, was slipping away. Yet amidst all the chaos, there was one thing that remained with me. Something I had kept hidden from everyone, even Rayhan. The deed. I don't even know why I kept it. Maybe it was a quiet, desperate form of hope. A hope that I would never need it. That my son would never turn his back on me. But I had always been careful. Always knew that in the end, the only thing that could prove my rights to that house was the deed. I kept it in a small envelope, tucked in a drawer, hidden away from the world. Nadia, seeing the state I was in, took charge. She was always the one who could see through the fog of my emotions and bring clarity. After Rayhan's call, she insisted we see a lawyer. It's time you take back what's yours, she told me. At first, I resisted, unsure if I had the strength to face more confrontation, but Nadia was unyielding. You've already lost so much, Ami, but you don't have to lose everything. The lawyer's office was sleek and professional, a place that felt far too cold for what I was about to face. The walls were adorned with certificates and awards, but nothing about the place felt like it could offer comfort or peace. It was a reminder of the legal battle I was now facing. I clutched the envelope containing the deed tightly in my hand as I sat down across from the lawyer, my hands trembling slightly. Nadia sat next to me, her presence a quiet anchor in the sea of uncertainty I was drowning in. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with glasses and a serious expression, looked over the documents I handed him, his brow furrowing in concentration. He didn't speak for a long moment, his eyes scanning the paper. The silence in the room was deafening, and I could hear the pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears. After what seemed like an eternity, the lawyer finally looked up at me. "This deed," he began slowly, "was never transferred into your son's name. It's still in your name, Ami. The house is legally yours." For a moment, the words didn't register. My brain couldn't quite process what he was saying. I had expected something different. A formality, a dismissal, maybe even a reminder that Rehan had already made the house his. But this was the last thing I had imagined. I sat there in stunned silence as Nadia's face lit up with relief, the tension in her shoulders easing. The lawyer, seeing my reaction, leaned forward slightly. "I understand this is a lot to take in, but legally, the house is still yours. Rehan never formally acquired ownership." Tears welled up in my eyes. It wasn't just the weight of the legal victory that hit me. It was the realization that there was still a chance to take back what was mine. That despite everything, despite the betrayal, I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. For the first time in days, I felt a small spark of hope in my chest. Nadia squeezed my hand gently. "See, I told you," she whispered. I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to laugh, to scream with relief. Another part, though, was still weighed down by the emotional burden of the entire situation. It wasn't just the house that I had lost. It was the relationship with Rehan, the sense of family that had been shattered. Could I really take back control of something that was so intricately tied to him? The lawyer continued speaking, laying out my options. He spoke with authority, explaining how we could move forward and regain full legal ownership. There were papers to sign, steps to take, but I wasn't listening as intently as I should have been. All I could think about was how Rehan would react when he found out. The thought of seeing him again, confronting him, made my stomach churn. How could he have done this to me? To us? "I'll handle the paperwork for you," the lawyer said, interrupting my thoughts. "Once we've filed this with the court, the house will be legally yours again. We'll make sure everything is in order." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I fully understood what he was saying. The relief had taken over, drowning out the details. The fact that I could regain the house, it felt unreal, like a dream I wasn't ready to wake up from. But it was happening, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could start to put the pieces of my life back together. Nadia looked at me, a proud smile on her face. "You've got this, Ami. You've always been strong. Don't let this situation take away your power." Her words, though comforting, felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. In the past, I had always been the one to protect my family, to put their needs before mine. But now, I realized that protecting myself was just as important. I had been living in the shadow of my son's needs, his wants, his desires. It was time to think about what I needed, for my own dignity, my own peace of mind. I stood up, feeling the strength slowly returning to my legs. I had been knocked down, yes, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. Not by a long shot. The lawyer handed me a set of papers to review and sign, but I barely registered them. I knew what I needed to do next. I had the deed. The house was mine. But more than that, I had my strength. I was ready to fight for it, for everything I had worked for. And I was ready to face Rehan, no matter how painful it might be. As I left the lawyer's office, Nadia walked beside me, her hand gently resting on my back. "We'll get through this, Ami," she said softly. "You've done the right thing, and no matter what happens, I'll be here." I nodded, a small smile finally forming on my lips. I wasn't alone anymore. I had Nadia, and more importantly, I had myself. The weight of the last few days hadn't quite hit me until I stood in front of the courthouse doors. The morning was crisp, the air slightly chill, but it wasn't just the weather that made my heart race. It was the feeling of finally standing up for myself, of doing something that, for the longest time, seemed impossible. Nadia was by my side, her hand on my shoulder as we entered the courthouse together. It felt surreal. This wasn't how I had imagined my life would unfold. The courthouse, sterile, formal, full of people who seemed more comfortable in their business suits than I ever could, felt foreign. But I knew that this was where my fight would start. It wasn't just for the house. It was for my dignity, for my right to exist beyond my role as a mother and a caretaker. I had spent years giving everything I had to my family, only to watch it slip away in an instant. But now I had the deed in my hand, and the law was on my side. The lawyer, who had been so professional in his earlier demeanor, was now guiding me through the final steps. He explained the process clearly, and with each word I felt more and more confident. I wasn't just a mother who had been left behind. Now I was taking back control. The paperwork had been filed, the court date had been set, and within a few hours, the legal documents were in my hands. My son Rehan and his wife Mira were served with the court notice. They would have no choice but to respond. "I can't believe this is really happening," I whispered to Nadia, clutching the papers tightly. She smiled, but it wasn't one of relief. It was one of pride. "You've earned this, Ami. You fought for it." I stood in the courthouse for a moment longer, letting the gravity of what was happening sink in. It wasn't just a victory over the house. It was my reclaiming of myself. For years, I had allowed myself to be defined by my role as a mother, as a wife, as a caretaker. But now, as I looked around, I realized that I was more than those things. I was a woman with my own life, my own decisions, and my own power. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. Not even Rehan. The next few days passed in a blur. Nadia and I stayed in contact with the lawyer, making sure everything was moving forward. Rehan and Mira didn't take kindly to being served the papers. The calls began, first from Rehan, then from Mira, and finally from both of them together. At first, they were angry. I could hear the frustration in Rehan's voice as he demanded to know why I was doing this. "What are you trying to prove, Ami? This is our home now," he shouted over the phone. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" "I'm not doing this for revenge, Rehan. I'm doing this for me," I said firmly, my voice steady. I hadn't realized how strong I sounded until I heard my own words. For so long, I had been the one apologizing, the one making concessions. But now I was no longer afraid to speak my truth. "I don't care about your house. I care about what you've done to me, what you've done to us," he spat. His words stung, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't about me apologizing anymore. This was about taking back what I had lost. Not just the house, but my sense of self. Rehan's anger wasn't going to dictate my life any longer. Then came the pleading. Mira, who had always been so polite, so measured, called next. Her tone was softer, but the desperation in her voice was unmistakable. Ami, please, can we talk about this? This isn't right. The house. It's already ours. You don't need to do this to us, please. Think of everything we've been through. I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. My mind wandered back to the days when I had been the one to provide for them, to take care of every need they had. And now it was them who were taking from me. But I couldn't let myself get lost in their manipulation. This wasn't about their guilt or their pleas. This was about what I needed. No, Mira, I said, my voice calm but firm. You've had your chance. You took what was mine. But now I'm taking it back. There was silence on the other end of the line. And then the phone went dead. The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't know how I felt about it. But part of me felt relief. Part of me felt empowered. I wasn't begging anymore. I was reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The day of the final court hearing arrived, and Nadia and I walked into the courthouse with our heads held high. Rehan and Mira were already there, their expressions a mixture of anger, frustration, and something else that I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe, or shame. It didn't matter. I wasn't interested in their emotions. I was there for my own closure, for my own peace. The courtroom was sterile and cold, the judge sitting at the front, watching us all with a calm, professional gaze. Rehan and Mira spoke first, trying to explain their side. But it was clear from the way they stammered, from the way they tried to twist the truth, that they didn't have much to stand on. They had acted impulsively, without thinking, without any regard for the years of sacrifice I had made. Then it was my turn. I stood, my hands trembling slightly, but my heart steady. I spoke from the heart, my words raw but honest. This isn't about a house, I said, my voice steady. This is about respect. This is about what I've built with my own hands, for my family. And I will not let anyone take that from me, not even my own son. The judge listened intently, nodding occasionally. I could see that he understood. He knew, as I did, that this wasn't just a legal matter. It was a matter of trust, of family, of betrayal. When the judge spoke, his voice was calm and clear. Given the circumstances and the fact that the deed is still in your name, the court rules in your favor. The house is yours, Mrs. Malik. There was a brief silence before the reality of the ruling sank in. Rehan's face twisted in disbelief, and Mira's eyes welled with tears. But for me, it was a moment of quiet triumph. I had won. Not just the house, but my self-respect, my right to exist beyond the expectations of others. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The walk back to the house was surreal. As I approached the front door, I could feel the weight of everything I had been through in the past few weeks. I had been cast aside by my own son, forced to leave the house I had poured so much of myself into. But now, here I was, standing in front of it once again, not as a guest, not as an intruder, but as the rightful owner. Nadia opened the door for me, and I stepped inside, the familiar scent of the house wrapping around me like an old, comforting blanket. Every corner of the house held memories, of laughter, of tears, of the life I had built. And now, it was mine again. I walked through the living room, feeling the warmth of it all. This wasn't just a house, it was a home. My home. It was time to rebuild. This time, I would do it on my terms. And Rayhan? He would have to live with the consequences of his actions. I had given him everything, but now I was taking back everything that was mine. The sun was setting, casting a soft golden hue across the living room. It felt almost poetic, as though the light outside was a reflection of the calm I had found within myself. The house, once a symbol of betrayal and loss, now felt like a sanctuary. It had been weeks since the court ruling, and though the dust had settled, the emotional journey I had undergone still lingered like an open wound, one that had slowly begun to heal. I sat on the old couch, the one Rayhan and I had picked out together when he was just a teenager. It seemed like a lifetime ago, back when the house was full of laughter, when the idea of him ever turning his back on me was unfathomable. I ran my fingers across the fabric, the threads worn with time, each mark a reminder of the many memories this house held. But now those memories were mine again. Nadia was sitting beside me, her presence a comforting anchor. She had been my support throughout everything. Through the legal battles, the emotional turmoil, and the uncertainty. She had stood by me like a lighthouse, guiding me through a storm. I had never once doubted that she would be there. And now, sitting with her in this quiet moment, I realized just how much she had helped me rediscover myself. We had just finished dinner. The meal simple, but comforting. Chicken stew with rice, something I'd made for years. The house smelled of it, the scent filling the air as it always had. It felt like everything was coming back to normal, but not in the way I had hoped. No, this was different. This was something new. I had changed, and I had to face that truth. I glanced at Nadia, who was reading a book across from me. Her quiet, steady presence reminded me of how much I had taken for granted in my life. I had been so focused on others, on being the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, that I had forgotten to care for the person who mattered most, myself. It was then that the thoughts I had been grappling with finally found their way into words. I gave him everything, I began softly, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I loved him with every ounce of my being. I raised him, sacrificed for him, and stood by him through everything. But respect. I paused, taking a deep breath. That has to be earned. Nadia looked up from her book, her eyes kind but understanding. She didn't need to say anything. She knew what I meant. We both knew that love, no matter how deep, can't fill the void left by disrespect. Rayhan had taken everything I had given him, and then turned away when I needed him the most. I had been a fool to think he would ever truly appreciate what I had done for him. But I still love him, Nadia, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I'll always love him. He's my son. I can't stop loving him, no matter how much he's hurt me. But what I've learned is that I need to love myself too. And that doesn't mean giving up on him. It means finally putting myself first. There it was, the realization that had been gnawing at my heart for months, maybe even years. I had spent my entire life putting others first, sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of my family. But now, it was time for me to heal. I had spent too many years giving pieces of myself away, only to be left with nothing. But now, I was reclaiming those pieces. I was putting myself back together. The room fell into a comfortable silence. The weight of the past few weeks, of everything I had been through, finally settled within me. The court case was over. Yes. The house was mine again. Yes. But what mattered most was the emotional journey I had taken. the strength I had discovered in myself, the courage to stand up for what I deserved. That was what made all the difference. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for me to say it, I spoke what I had been avoiding. I don't regret it, Nadia. Not for a second. Maybe it took me too long to get here, but I'm finally starting to see my own worth. I don't have to live in anyone's shadow anymore. Not even Rayhan's. Nadia smiled softly, her eyes filled with pride. She knew what it had taken for me to get here. She knew the years of self-doubt, the pain of watching my son turn against me. But she also knew the woman I was now, strong, independent, and unapologetically myself. As the evening wore on, I found myself thinking of others, of women like me, women who had spent their lives in the background, taking care of everyone else but never taking the time to care for themselves. I thought of the older women who had raised children, kept homes, and given everything they had to others, only to be overlooked or cast aside when they needed love and care in return. To them, I wanted to say this: don't let guilt silence your worth. You've earned your peace. I wasn't just talking about the house. I was talking about something much deeper, about the value we place on ourselves, about the belief that we are worthy of love, of respect, of peace. It was time for all of us to stop hiding behind guilt, to stop letting others dictate our worth. We had given everything for our families, but now it was time to give something back to ourselves. I had spent too many years feeling guilty. Guilty for taking up space. Guilty for needing anything for myself. I had allowed my identity to become so intertwined with my roles as a mother and a wife that I forgot I was more than that. I was a woman, a human being with my own dreams, my own desires, my own needs. I had lost sight of that somewhere along the way. But now, I had found it again. As I sat in the quiet of the living room, the last rays of sunlight slipping away, I realized that I didn't need Rayhan's approval. I didn't need Mira's forgiveness. All I needed was my own. I had given them everything I could, but I had forgotten to give myself what I deserved: respect, love, and a life where I didn't have to hide in the shadows of others. I had learned to love myself again, and in doing so, I had regained the strength to move forward. The world could take my house, my possessions, my reputation, but it could never take away the peace I had found within myself. That was something no one could steal, not even my son. I turned to Nadia, who had been quietly watching me this whole time. She didn't need to say anything. I could see the pride in her eyes. I knew she understood. We had both been through so much, and now we were on the other side of it. The weight had been lifted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Ami, you've done something that so many women never get the chance to do. You've found yourself again. I smiled, a genuine smile, one that reached my eyes. Yes, Nadia, I have. And I won't ever lose myself again. The room was quiet for a while longer, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt at ease in my own skin. The journey had been long, and at times painful, but it had led me here, to a place where I could finally be myself, unapologetically and without regret. And that was worth more than any house, any piece of property, or any title in the world. It was a peace I had earned, and it was mine to keep.